Good morning. Thanks for joining me. Today we're talking about my memories of Alan Stewart, a close friend, an outstanding road racer in the UK, and a fellow apprentice at Smith Docks during the 60s. Where shall I start? I met Alan when we both were serving our apprenticeships as apprentice fitters in the training school at Smith Docks, South Bank, Middlesbrough, on the River Tees in northeast UK. Alan was from Gisborough, I was from North Ormsby. We both went to Smith Docks each day, and then later on we had one day release to Cleveland Technical College in Redcar. But back to the early days. Smith Docks had a procedure where they took all apprentices in, and you got a short couple of weeks on all the various trades for apprentices: plater, electrician, plumber, caulker, mech fitter. So you got a taste for it, and you were assessed during your time in the training school. I got to know Alan because of his love of motorbikes. I come from a motorcycle background where we all had velos, velosets. Mine at the time would have been a Velocet Mac. Alan Stewart's bike of choice at the time was a Greaves Challenger, a road bike by Greaves with amazing front forks. He drove from Gisborough to South Bank each day. I took two buses I took one smoke-ridden bus from North Ormsby to South Bank, and then walked with all the other shipyard workers down to Smith Docks, through the big gates and into the shipyard. I'd had initial employment at Smith Docks as an office boy on a push bike, working for the personnel officer, pedalling round the shipyard, taking letters to various departments, so I got to know everybody and everywhere. I first met Alan in the training school, as said earlier. Lots of things went on in the training school to test each other. We ran out of marking blue one time, and so we were using red lead. Red lead was highly poisonous, but we were using it every day to mark out pieces of metal to be cut and filed to shape. Apprentices being apprentices, some of this red lead found its way onto things that you would pick up just before you had something to eat or something to drink. So you were transferring it to your mouth if you didn't look out for yourself. Another mad hobby of interest in the training school was the game of slapping. How it came about, who knows, but it set one apprentice against another, stood face to face, and you would slap each other in turn until one broke down. Yeah, cruel world as an apprentice. Back to meeting Alan. Alan would talk with all the other mechanical fitters, myself included, about his love of bikes. There was a chap at Smith Docks called Gordon Smith, a rough turner in a machine shop. He was an ace machinist, the best I've ever seen, and he was also a stalwart for anybody that had a motorcycle or loved motorcycles. So everybody that had a bike or loved bikes were drawn to him and hung off his every words. Alan and Gordon, living in Gisborough, ended up chatting together, building and riding bikes together. The incredible angles of lean that Alan got out of the Greaves was staggering to see. I followed him a few times on my bike, and it was staggering to watch. He was in a different level. He progressed to owning a 650 BSA super rocket. I knew him better at this point, and when I went to his house in Gisborough, his family home, I saw this super rocket, and he decided he would like to race it, so he would have to lighten it. And that's what we proceeded to do, strip and lighten and rebuild his super rocket. One of the main issues with the bike was the petrol tank being steel. It weighed too much for racing. Now, I had a fiberglass racing tank on one of my specials, a Banville special. I suppose that's subject for another video. Anyway, I brought the fiberglass petrol tank along, and it just rocked on the cylinder head. So when my father heard about this, he cut away the bottom of the tank and re-fiberglassed it so that it would fit over Alan's Super Rocket BSA engine. And that's how he came to have a fiberglass tank on his BSA. Can I just say at this point, I used to spanner and take photos in those days. The late 70s, early 80s. I submitted a photo of Alan on his Super Rocket, complete with my fiberglass tank, and I published it on the back of the Evening Gazette. Brilliant. His first ever publicity photo. Early days of racing, he used to travel the country with Gordon, and they would go out as if Alan was Gordon, so they would share entry fees. In other words, splitting the cost. I've got photos somewhere of Alan walking towards me at Cadwell Park, holding a tenner, a 10-bob note. That was his first ever prize money. I've also got photos of him masked up so the marshals couldn't tell who he was going out on the bike. Gordon would achieve his first win at Cadwell Park, and Alan did many practice laps. He progressed to racing at other circuits across the country, and I was there the day at Scarborough Road Races when he beat a Works Triumph, and Russell Armstrong, a dealer and sponsor from Middlesbrough, came across and offered Alan, who was riding a Norton at the time, a 750 Norton, he offered Alan sponsorship, and Alan jumped at it with both feet. I digress slightly. I should say this Norton was one of a pair, and it was called, the pair were called Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Came from a racing stable somewhere in the south. And I can remember Alan racing the Norton and doing very well. Alan also was offered sponsored rides, and he once rode a 750 Yamaha for Saunders and Lewis. This was in the Northwest 200, and he was telling me in some conversation that there was a 2-mile straight and he was doing 174 miles an hour, and the back end was shaking from side to side because it wasn't set up for him. It was just a one-off ride. So he took on some epic challenges. Croft was his local circuit as well as mine. He cut his teeth at Croft. Jumping back many years, and I'm jumping all over the place, but this is a mind of a 73-year-old, so forgive me. As a family, myself, my brother and my dad used to marshal for Middlesbrough Motor Club. We had a corner, it was at the end of Railway Street and it was called Spa Bend. A very fast left-hander before a hairpin, after a long straight, which was Railway Street. When I told Alan of our marshalling, he wanted to join in, but not as a marshal on a post, as a travelling marshal. So I arranged through Middlesbrough Motor Club for him to come along as a travelling marshal at one of the road race meetings. His task was to follow round after every race had finished and sort out stragglers, get them back to the pits. Well, that was what his task was supposed to be. All I saw that day was him blasting round Croft, learning racing lines, and I guess it all helped. So he did many, many laps as a travelling marshal at Croft in his early days. As a family, my father and I travelled around with Alan, supporting him, doing any spanner work that was necessary. Alan would have his father in tow, and I had a friend, John Baker. So that's a blast from the past. Both have gone, sadly. That's John Baker and Alan Stewart, R.I.P., as well as our beloved fathers. As a little aside, when I joined the Merchant Navy in 1970, we had a party at Alan's at Woodhouse Road, Gisborough. And Alan's dad was that drunk, he wanted me to take his Merchant Navy hat with me on my travels. He pressed me into having it. Oh dear. Happy days. Other times, meeting up in the Anchor, a pub on the outskirts of Gisborough, lots of other motorcyclists in the back room, all talking about bikes. My dad and Gordon became firm friends. Gordon was into hang gliding, and I heard my dad one drunken evening talking about hang gliding, so anything went in the conversation. Gordon got himself a Velocet, so who would he approach for Velocet expertise but my dad, Eddie Pollard, to give him his full name, Arthur Edmund Pollard. I digress. Back to Alan. Travelling the length and breadth of the country with Alan, supporting his road racing, I saw him have many wins. But then families came along for me and for Alan, and we didn't go around together much. I still kept in touch. and watched his exploits. He achieved ACU 250 and 350 British Championships, ACU Star Awards, riding Yamahas for Russ Armstrong. I think they dabbled with a 125 Honda, but I didn't get to see much of that, so I can't comment too much. I saw Alan many years later when I was in Gisborough and he moved to Enfield Chase, and he used to run a quiz night at the pub over the road. And then, sad to say, I heard of his demise. Happy days, Alan, sharing ideas and meals in each other's houses in Bargate Street, Northamptonby and Woodhouse Road, Gisborough. We became firm friends. I miss you, Alan. I hear you've got a son, and I'd love to pass this on. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Join me again soon.